This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Hey, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Real Talk. We're going to get into it exactly that in just a second with Ariella, Kimmel, and Kristin Raworth. We're talking about an open letter that's been making news across the country. We've seen at least one high-profile dismissal from a job at the University of Alberta's Sexual Assault Center. This is an open letter in support of Palestine. So says it at the top, stand with Palestine, but it's the contents of that letter, the assertion of that letter, in particular, questions around the validity of claims of sexual assaults, of rapes that happened back on October 7th when Hamas terrorists perpetrated the worst attack in Israel's history. It's got some people talking about a new movement in Canada. It's subtle. It's not actually called this. You'd never see the hashtag, well, at least not seriously, but Me Too, unless you're a Jew. We're going to get into that letter in just a second. Plus, Charles Adler will join us in the second half of today's episode. Is it true? New polling from Angus Reid shows that Canadians may care a little bit less about climate change than they did a year ago, than they did 2 years ago, than they did the last time there was a federal election. We'll find out. Plus, of course, you know, Chuck proudly hails from Winnipeg. We'll probably have to bring up the results of yesterday's Grey Cup game. If you PVR'd it and you're planning on watching it later and you're avoiding all news coverage today, I know that's very few of you for a high-profile live sporting event like the Grey Cup, but consider this your spoiler alert. We'll officially get started in 30 seconds, but first we wanted to put a shout out to those of you that are looking for new opportunity right now. Maybe a new week, a fresh start is what you're looking at. Maybe starting a new career. Rello is where we want to point you. That's R-E-L-O, Rello.ca. Rello's got a great opportunity for those of you that are maybe intrigued by the opportunity to be your own boss, run a thriving business, leave cubicle life behind. If that sounds pretty good, plus you add unlimited earning potential on top of that, a career in real estate could be your perfect match. You can get started today by enrolling with Rello. That's R-E-L-O, Rello.ca. Alberta's top real estate school is going to support you every single step of the way, from studying for your exam to getting ready to get that license secured and beyond. The relationship continues. Plus, with Rello, you can study 100% online on your own schedule. It doesn't get any better than that. Right now, you can save 20% off any Rello course. It's a great opportunity for Real Talkers. 20% off any course with the code REALTALK. That's all one word, Real Talk, at Rello.ca. So the letter says, stand with Palestine, call on political leaders to end their complicity in genocide. And it goes on from there, addressed to members of parliament. This letter is probably getting more play than the authors or those that signed on to it even anticipated. It's prompted an editorial at The Line. That's readtheline.ca by our leadoff guests today, Kristin Raworth and Ariella, Kimmel. Kristin is a sexual violence survivor and advocate. Ariella, VP of Strategic Comms and Development for Winston Wilmot, and an active volunteer in the Jewish community. Good morning to both of you. Welcome to the show. Ariella, why don't we start with you? How did this open letter first get on your radar, and where did you see the first red flag?
So actually, it got on my radar through a Twitter account that tagged me in it, I think on Wednesday, and I retweeted it and started sharing it. But going through it, I also started to point out the anti-Semitic organizations that co-signed it. So that's also kind of one of my biggest warnings I want to put forward is know who you're signing on with before you sign on to things. And then, you know, from there, I think it took a few days, but it finally kind of got on people's radar. And eventually, University of Alberta took the necessary steps. But I think we have a few other signatories to talk about as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are some significant ones, and I guess probably depending on where you're watching this or where you're listening from across the country, different groups may join out at you. Maybe the most high-profile politician. You wouldn't have said this a year ago when fewer people knew who Sarah Jama was, but obviously ostracized, expelled from the NDP caucus in Ontario. The party's been criticized for that, by the way. But an MPP out of Hamilton Centre, along with Susan Kim, a councillor in Victoria. But then you've got union leaders. You got the AUPE on this, local chapters out of Edmonton, QP, pretty high-profile union, the Pride Center of Edmonton, which we can get into that in just a second. Kristin, what prompted you to join forces with Ariella and put this piece together in the line?
Well, we actually had talked about doing this piece before the letter came out. We had started working on it last week, like at the beginning of the week, just because we were seeing more and more denial of the experiences of Jewish women, and specifically around the issues of sexual violence. And obviously that is something very close to my heart, is, believing survivors and believing people, and seeing from folks who would typically be champions of survivors of sexual violence and bringing light to sexual violence, straight up denying that this was even happening and showing zero care for this particular group. So I texted Ariella and we started talking, and that's how we decided to start writing this. And then she actually sent the letter to me when she found it on Wednesday. And obviously I was deeply disturbed to see that the U of A Sexual Assault Center had signed on to that letter, because of the fact that there is that paragraph that specifically calls sexual violence allegations unverified. And as a sexual assault center, you should not be signing on to something that is disbelieving of sexual violence.
Yeah, so let's get into that. I mean, people are going to say, well, what is the specific line, or what are you talking about? So maybe I'll read this, and it starts, dear members of Parliament, you've called on Canada to urge for an immediate ceasefire. By the way, it opens with, we, the undersigned, residing in so-called Canada, urge Canadian political leaders to end complicity in ongoing massacres and genocide in Gaza, occupied Palestine. It says Canadian political parties are dehumanizing Palestinians, facilitating Israeli-led genocide against them. It says all of you, to the MPs, complicit in Israel's killing of over 5,000 Palestinians in Gaza. The Liberal government arguing with a high degree of confidence that Israel did not strike a hospital. Goes on to say Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the federal NDP, repeating the unverified accusation that Palestinians were guilty of sexual violence, revoking the passes of 4 delegates who joined a pro-Palestine party at the NDP convention. So your headline reads, believing almost all women. Ariella, take us into the believing all women premise, because this has also started a subsequent conversation online. People saying, well, maybe the idea of believing all women is problematic, and this just proves it.
Except for it's only prompted because it's believing Jewish women. The Me Too movement, when it started, really was active in the wording was believe all women. And I know Kristin and I can both say, like, we were engaged in both in the movement and outspoken, and it is believe all women. And why now? Why now is it that we should maybe reconsider if we believe all women when it's just Israeli women? And to be blunt and honest, this isn't any different than I wrote in the Hub, like probably a month ago, about just in general how Israel's had to release videos about what's happened. What other country would have to release videos of their burnt civilians, people who were burnt alive, right? Or videos of people running into shelters and having grenades thrown at them, just to make people believe what's happened. Even this morning, a video was put up about a child being chased down by Hamas terrorists and shot and killed. It's like, why do we have to justify or prove what happened? And it's a double standard, and I will blatantly call it anti-Semitic double standards.
Ariella, I want to ask you in follow-up. People have said, and I've just been paying attention. I knew that I was going to talk to the two of you on today's episode, and so over the course of the weekend, I've been paying attention to some of the dialogue around this. People are saying, well, how is this letter anti-Semitic? I don't understand how it's anti-Semitic. Can you explain?
So I'm just going to particularly focus on the unverified claim side. I think that's really where Kristin and I have been focused, and why I will call it anti-Semitic is it is very blatantly believe all women unless they're Jewish, or Me Too unless a Jew. Israel's had to release forensic evidence that it's happened. I saw the 40-minute video of the Hamas GoPro cameras. Those are images I'll never erase from my mind. But if you read, Sabrina Matto and Matt Gurney, for example, also were at the viewing, and which I hate calling it, and they wrote about it, and both of them, they state that you can clearly see there was sexual violence committed. I'm calling it anti-Semitic because your decision to believe women is now based on where they're from and whether or not you agree with their government. And there is a blurred line now between what I would say anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and we're really seeing that.
We should note that MPP JAMA has gone so far as you both write to publicly state that accounts of rape are, quote, a lie pushed forward by the Zionist lobby. Kristin, can you explain to people that don't know what DARVO is and how that applies to this, how it's relevant, this acronym, deny, attack, and reverse victim offender?
I will throw that to Ariella because that was actually her section of the piece. But I will just build on what she said quickly before I let her tackle that question. A lot of the responses that we've been getting and a lot of the responses I have been getting is that somehow we are justifying any action by the state of Israel by talking about sexual violence and the fact that sexual violence occurred. And that's where people just, it is consistently a source of frustration, not just in this situation, but whenever I talk about sexual violence, and Ariella can speak to this too, that if it doesn't align with your worldview, or it's someone that you like, or it's a situation that you like, you just refuse to acknowledge it. And in this situation, people are saying, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Yes, that's bad too, but that's not what we're talking about. And that's not what we were trying to highlight in this story. And I think people wanted us to speak to every single incident of sexual violence that occurs in the Middle East, but that's not, again, what we were trying to highlight, because that's not what's being denied. You do not see that on the same level, people in the movement denying any crimes committed by Israel, but you see it constantly against Israeli women.
You point as well to posts on Instagram that had been released by the University of Alberta Sexual Assault Center. We want to note that the director of the center was canned over the weekend. My understanding is, and I've seen people applauding President Flanagan at the university, it sounds like this kind of went all the way to the top, which is understandable. But from the University of Alberta Sexual Assault Center posts as well, in support of pro-Palestinian rallies, noting that, quote, resistance is justified when people are occupied. There is only one solution, Antifada revolution. To state the obvious, it strikes me as more an individual, the director of this center who lost her job, sort of treating the center and its platform and its amplification power as her own personal megaphone. It doesn't strike me as somebody that maybe understood the role of a center like that or what that center needs to provide. Maybe I'm stating something obvious here, but I've actually never seen, or haven't seen in quite some time, such gross negligence in a position of leadership. Ariella, as you write, the Sexual Assault Center stating resistance is justified after October 7th. I can't imagine a Jewish student at the University of Alberta approaching that center for supports under any context. It's mind-blowing, actually.
Yeah, so looking at that poster, just like in giving a little context, that was a walkout organized across the country on the anniversary of Kristallnacht. So the pogrom that that targeted Jewish businesses, homes, synagogues in Nazi Germany on that same day, on November 9th. And in Montreal, the poster that went along with it had a picture of glass being broken by someone's foot, which was from the BB riots that happened there in the early 2000s. So, that no one's tying in connections is what's really problematic to me. But yeah, those chants are, resistance is justified is saying, well, that the attacks on October 7th were justified, or there's only one solution, Intifada revolution. We saw Saturday in Toronto, a child, chanting from the stage at a rally, about celebrating the Intifada. The second Intifada was years of suicide bombings that targeted Israeli civilians at, in clubs, in restaurants, on buses, and waiting for the lineup to go through security in the malls. To go into malls became dangerous in Israel because of the Intifada. Calling for an Intifada is calling for the death of Israeli civilians, and it's happening on our streets. So to see a sexual assault center openly advocating for it and justifying it is horrifying.
Let's talk about just the other leadership as well. Like Kristin, when October 7th, and obviously I think all of us agree everything. Well, I shouldn't say all of us agree. You can speak for yourselves, but let me say everything that's happening right now is horrific. This is a complete nightmare. But on October 7th and into the 8th, there were some posts going out from organizations. Like there was a prominent Canadian union that was basically celebrating what had happened in Israel on October 7th. I had tweeted about it. It absolutely blows my mind. And I'm just to bounce this off both of you and our audience as well. We'll get into the live chat here. What do the both of you think is an appropriate type response from when you have, I don't know if this is union comms, like if I'm a QP employee or if I'm an AUPE employee, like I'm quite certain that Jewish people work in those unions. I'm quite certain that you don't have to be Jewish to feel like it's absolutely preposterous. If I was paying union dues and I saw that my union was signing on to something like this, like, what do you think? This is not normal. And I'm just curious to know what the two of you think is an appropriate response for this, what you think would be an appropriate follow, what you would say to union members that are appalled to see their unions named on this open letter. Over to you.
I think
Kristin, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just say, I mean, I used to be a member of the AUPE, and I would say that, if I was them, I'd want to vote on our leadership, in terms of the people who said, especially with this, I think it was CUP, right? Ariella, the one who had, If I was in that and my leadership was saying those things, especially because, if you're and I want to stress that there's a very, very big difference, in my opinion, between talking about a ceasefire, talking about, the devastation that is occurring in Gaza versus actively celebrating and or denying, which oddly people do it at the same time, which I don't know how they do that, but they manage, between actively denying and celebrating the actions of Hamas. Those are two separate things. And a lot of people get them mixed. As we saw over the weekend, I think it was on Sunday, a U of A law professor talked about the firing of the president of the Students' Union and said she was fired for, bravely speaking up. No, she wasn't. She was let go for denying the experience of sexual violence survivors. And that needs to be made very clear. We are not talking about everyone who's calling for a ceasefire or speaking about what's going on in Gaza should suffer some kind of consequence. We are talking about denial and celebration of horrific acts of violence.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a big difference.
And it's just like, the word that my brain is telling me to use right now is oblivious. You are oblivious to be posting on this and to be participating in this. To be specific, like I understand why some of the groups sign on. They're more than welcome. People are welcome to sign their names to this. If politicians want to sign their name to it and pay the piper, that's completely fine. But if I'm a member of like the Alberta Union of Public Employees, Local 54, Chapter 001, I'm not very stoked about this, right? Like if I'm the Pride Center of Edmonton, like I'd be curious to know what the leadership of the Pride Center of Edmonton thinks that Hamas thinks about them. I'd be really curious to put it, in a potentially crass but straight up real fashion. Like, what are these people thinking? Like Kuby Union on here. Like if I'm a member of Kuby, it's absolutely unbelievable. I feel like this story is actually really underrated. And people are saying, I think some people are going overboard. People are saying, there's a lot of academics on here. There's a lot of researchers on here. People are saying, well, if they're here on like visas, they should be deported. I don't think so, to be honest with you. I think that people can face personal consequences for signing on to things, but in my mind, it's the organizations that are attaching their names to this that are participating in particularly egregious conduct. I don't know if you agree, Ariella.
I agree. My favorite is that they term themselves civil society, and I'm like, how civilized is this? like we could talk about Kuby. Shout out to Catherine Marshall, who's currently has a class action lawsuit against Fred Hahn, going through the Human Rights Tribunal, and I'm pretty sure in the last little while has like tripled the membership of it, people signing on. If I was a member of CUPE or AUPE, I would really be questioning what my leadership is doing, engaging in, early days, especially with CUPE, celebrating, the attacks. They didn't put out words saying we're sorry they happened. They didn't have anything, any type of remorse for afterwards either. Fred doubled down multiple times on his stance. And so I think, the Pride Center of Edmonton, AUPE, Sarah Jam, I don't expect anything different from, but Susan Kim, a city councillor in Victoria, all these organizations. What do you also know about the other organizations you're signing on with? I'll put out, for example, the Palestinian Youth Movement, the day after the attacks, posted on Instagram calling for a celebration of what happened, basically asking people to come and I think it was Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, but they organized, a glory to the martyrs, which was celebrating the Hamas terrorists who went in and massacred over 1,000 people. And at that time, we had no idea the extent of what had happened. I will remind everybody. And so their instant reaction was celebration. Or Toronto for Palestine, the day the news broke, were seen handing out candy in celebration of what happened. So this is really where I get, I have a lot of issues is, who are you signing on with, and why are you not taking the time to educate yourself on it? And then why do you then come back at the Jewish community and tell us that we don't have a right to see this as anti-Semitic? You're actually just gaslighting us at this point.
I want to read from this. People can check out the piece at readtheline.ca. We're talking to the co-authors, Kristin Raworth and Ariella Kimmel. Quote, Hamas didn't just commit atrocities, they live streamed them. Yet it's acceptable within the progressive feminist movement to deny and justify their actions. If you advocate for women, then that advocacy cannot be dependent on whether you agree with the government of the country from which the victim comes. We implore these advocates to ask themselves, why is it that Israel, the only Jewish state, has to actively try to make you believe? The international feminist community has failed Israeli women. They have at best turn their backs on them and at worst continue to re-victimize them. Neither of you are on here cheering for Benjamin Netanyahu. Neither of you are on here celebrating the deaths of thousands of civilians in Palestine, including the elderly and tragically children. And I want to be clear about that as well. In my mind, the anti-Semitism that's on display. I mean, there was a group over the weekend sharing, and I'll call this up from when we talked to Charles Adler, anti-Semitic maps of New York City targets on social media, including the New York Post newsroom, literally with pins dropped on a map. I said this last week on the show. This feels like 1930 again. Businesses are being firebombed and shot at because of Jewish ownership or Jewish operators, and that's puts regular, ordinary, average people in a position where we got to say something. And I'm grateful that the two of you are joining us here to talk about it. Before we thank you for your time, I want to give you a chance to make sure you mention something maybe we haven't got to yet, or give our audience something to think about, something to focus on. Ariella, you want to go first?
Sure. You mentioned how this kind of feels like the 1930s, and I'm the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, and I grew up with learning about the Holocaust from a very young age, and schools are being firebombed and shot at. On Friday, the Jewish high school in Toronto had to be evacuated because of a bomb threat, and the daycare next door had to be evacuated with them. I grew up going to public school in Ottawa, having "Death to the Jews," "Hitler should have killed you all" written on your desk. So in some ways, this doesn't surprise me, the anti-Semitism that's been bubbling below the surface, but it's now out in full force. And I was having a conversation with a friend recently who said, what do we do next? And I said, I actually don't know, because I don't know anymore how you put the lid on what has happened and make Jews in this country feel safe again. And I think really, I'm grateful for Kristin for co-writing this piece with me, because the sexual violence is, is something that no other country would have ever been in a position that they would have had to almost go out. They have to go out and justify. They're showing videos to journalists about it. The forensic team is coming out and talking about what they're seeing. That's broken pelvises and ripped panties and things like that. And why? I really need to implore people to ask themselves, like, why is it the Jewish state is the only country that has to continuously justify that, and prove what happened to their civilians? And I'll go as far as say it's so blatantly anti-Semitic. And if that's where you're standing on this, ask yourself, why, and what would you do to your Jewish neighbors at this point? Because I will tell you, I can't speak for every Jew in this country, but I look at my neighbors and I would ask myself, would you put me on a cattle car or would you hide me? And that's terrifying.
Huh. Kristin?
Well, that's a heck of a statement to follow up.
Yeah.
I will just say that, I've been doing this work since 2017. The first time you and I met, Ryan, was when I was the spokesperson for the I Believe You campaign. For years and years and years, what we, myself, advocates, the centers, what we've been trying to do is to create this culture of belief and support for all survivors. A message that, of course, is harder to work with when you have a director of a sexual assault center advocating the opposite. I was glad to see that situation was resolved, because I don't think that survivors would have felt safe in that environment. But in the entire time I've been doing this work, and as you know, I've had my share of dust-ups on the internet. I have never been targeted in the way that I have since I started speaking out clearly on the sexual violence experienced by Jewish women. I have been called racist. I have been called a warmonger. I have been called other names I am not going to use this early in the day. And I think that speaks to the really big divide right now. And I would ask that anyone listening to this whose knee-jerk reaction is to want to label myself or Ariella something or come after us, why is that your reaction to us talking about believing survivors of sexual violence? Why is it that you want to, instead of accepting and understanding that violence occurs, especially sexual violence as a war crime, occurs in war, and that is what happened here, that you immediately want to deny it and attack the people saying it? I think that that's something that people need to sit with and think about with themselves, because we are not going to address sexual violence overall or as an issue, especially within war, if people won't stand up for every single person who experiences it.
Well said. That's Kristin Raworth, joined by Ariella Kimmel. You can read their feature, Believing Almost All Women, at readtheline.ca. We'll link to it directly in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. Thank you to the both of you. It's difficult subject matter, obviously, but I appreciate your courage and putting it out there and being willing to talk about it here on Real Talk.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. Charles Adler up in just a second. You can let us know what you think about this. Graham says, thank you for having the guts, basically, to talk about this for sure. He said the bravery to have these conversations. Let me put it this way. Like there's the leadership of like AUPE, for example, or QP. And I should note, with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, it's Local 3906 in Edmonton. That's the Indigenous Solidarity Working Group. That's one thing, right? Like if I'm a union member, and people will write in to us guaranteed and say, well, hang on a second, what about political activism by unions, right? Like if I'm a conservative and I'm a member of a union that is donating money to NDP candidates in Alberta, or is donating money to federal liberal candidates, where are my rights there? What options do I have at my disposal as a union member when a portion of my union dues, in theory, right, and you have a good point, are being used to further a political cause or support a political candidate that I don't support personally? And I'm sure that other people may come back and argue and say, well, part of a union leadership's job, the executive, is to determine which political parties would have the policies that might most benefit the union, and then yada, yada, yada. And other people would say, well, what about other groups, like business advocacy groups that would support and donate to conservatives? And we can get into that. And that's actually perfect, that type of conversation for a show like this. I love those types of conversation. Should unions be donating to political parties? What a great subject for a show. My immediate answer is no, hell no. But you can let me know what you think. I'll hear you out. I love that. This is different, right? Talking about Jagmeet Singh, repeating, quote, unverified claims of sexual assaults by Palestinians on October 7th? What? Can you imagine? Can you imagine being the director of a sexual assault center and signing your name to that? Essentially saying, prove it. So you say you were sexually assaulted? Prove it? Hasn't the whole message for the last 10 years been, we believe you? Unbelievable. Now, this isn't the first time that we've seen somebody in a position of leadership, and I'm not naming her, by the way, because then we're going to, sick the dogs on everybody's going to accuse Real Talk of piling on and singling her out. So you'll notice I'm not naming the director of the U of A Sexual Assault Center that lost her job over the weekend. Her bio online is particularly interesting. She notes proudly that despite having the immense privilege of being paid well to do the advocacy that she does, she still works with community groups and nonprofits to end policing in Edmonton. So it gives you a bit of an idea of the perspective of the person that you're dealing with. But this is a gross betrayal of the job that you have been entrusted with. And what message does it send? I mean, the university had absolutely no choice in this matter. Zero choice. There was no meeting. Well, there probably was a meeting, but if I'm the president of the university, there's no meeting. Like, this is an immediate decision. You could say, well, there's academics on there, though. There's dozens of them that are named, and researchers. I'm not going to go through and name them all, but from a lot of universities. University of Alberta, University of Calgary, Mohawk College, some of them down in the States, Eastern Canada, York, McMaster. There's one from University of Toronto, Windsor. There's a ton, University of Victoria. They're entitled to their position. Take your position and own it. If you're going to sign a letter, if I'm going to go sign a letter that basically says I'm not going to believe that women were sexually assaulted, women that say they were, until they prove it, then you can deal with the consequences of that, of taking that position. That's real life. People deal with consequences of positions they take all the time. But when you are the director of an organization in particular, I mean, we haven't spent a ton of time talking about the union. We've spent even less time talking about the leadership, the new leadership of the Pride Center of Edmonton. That blows my mind as well. But I kind of get it. I kind of get how some people are wired in a certain way to support these causes immediately without really thinking about what they're getting into. Like, I think there's some inexperience at play here. I think that some of the people that have signed this letter, though I don't know them personally, are maybe a little bit naive. Is that fair to suggest? But the most egregious one on the list is the Sexual Assault Center's director. Like, if you have this job, you cannot sign that letter. And so she's not the director anymore. You can send us a note to talk@ryanjesperson.com if you want to share a thought on this. It's something that we're happy to open up for conversation, though I don't know what angle you're going to take on this if you're going to try to disagree with Kristin and Ariella. I mean, best of luck to you. Charles Adler in 1 minute, but first I want to remind you that Athabasca University is offering right now an opportunity for you to be able to scale up your knowledge, to work toward a program or even a degree, a graduate degree, maybe an MBA without leaving the comfort of your own home. It's great for parents. It's great for people with irregular work schedules. Maybe you're a shift worker. It's great for people living in rural parts of the country that, well, a commute to a brick and mortar university just isn't realistic. Athabasca University is Canada's open university, and they're offering incredible chances for you to get ready to enter or re-enter a dynamic job market in Canada. More than 9 out of 10 of their alumni, 94% in fact, say they're satisfied with the quality of their AU education. 92% of alumni say they're in a job related to their field of study. Not every university can claim that, to say the very least. You can learn more and get the application process started today by visiting athabascau.ca. And we want to give a big shout out to our friends at Complete Care Restoration as well. A lot of people think of Complete Care Restoration when they hear of fire damage, flood damage. Understandable. That's exactly what they've been doing for the last 10 years. Still a family-owned business, but they're also experts in construction and renovation projects. which means if you're looking to maybe get that new bathroom built down in your basement or develop the entire basement, maybe you want to overhaul your kitchen, or maybe you've got an office building somewhere in the city and you're starting to think about converting that to condos, apartments to help address Canada's housing crisis. This is what they do at Complete Care, and we recommend them with 2 thumbs up. You can find them online at completecarerestoration.ca. First show of every week, we get to hang out with Charles Adler, the Emmy Award-winning RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award-winning talk radio legend. And Chuck, I was thinking of you yesterday. I didn't text you. It looked like you and your Winnipeg Bomber Nation, the Blue Bomber Nation, was going to be celebrating another Grey Cup, officially proclaiming itself to be a dynasty, but the Montreal Alouettes had other plans. How are you wrapping your minds around what happened in one of the most dramatic finishes in Grey Cup history?
Well, as you know, I've been a huge fan of Edmonton teams. I was a huge fan of the Edmonton Oiler dynasty. I was a huge fan of the Edmonton Eskimo dynasty. And I honestly thought we were just, kind of knocking on the door of a dynasty here in Winnipeg. And we now have a dynasty deficit. Budget deficits are horrible. Affordability issues are horrible. But please think of us here in Winnipeg. We're suffering from a dynasty deficit brought on by a game where there may have been, I don't know, there may have been a little bit of complacency on the field. Complacency is always your number one enemy. But I've got to give credit where credit is due. The Montreal Alouettes had guts, determination, constructive aggression, and just a hell of a lot of talent in the most important quarter of football, and that's the fourth. They were amazing, and I must admit that even though I'm a homer like all other sports fans and I was rooting for the Bombers, I actually forgot that I was a homer. I actually forgot how important it was for me to have this dynasty established in the last 10 minutes of the game because I was so ensconced in the talent on the football field. And I think the good news there for all of us fans, whether it's NFL, CFL, NHL, I don't care. Every now and then we're watching a game where the homer cap is blown right off our heads because we're focused on the game. And the story here is the game is bigger than any of the players, bigger than any of the teams. We love the game.
Yeah, earlier this year we did an episode. Johnny, do you remember what it was called? I think it was called Is the CFL Dead or Is the CFL Dying or something like that? You remember that? And we had sort of made the assertion because it was obviously a very difficult year in Edmonton, extremely difficult, and the stands were just very sparsely populated with fans. I've never really seen anything like it, like probably a tenth of when I moved to this city almost 20 years ago. I mean, they used to draw 30,000 to every game no matter what. And if the Riders were in town, they'd draw 45,000. Now they're drawing like 5, no matter what the teams tell you. Bums in the seats, there was like 4,000 or 5,000 this year. So really tough to see. But yesterday, we sat down, we watched the Grey Cup as a family, and I had to say, it was great product. It was a great game. It was a great finish. Great halftime show. My son heard Green Day for the very first time, so he was enjoying that. I thought that the league did a really good job yesterday, and I was happy to see it. Nobody wants to see the CFL die, but you look very cynical about that.
Well, CFL isn't dying. I give you one, basic reason. I mean, because of our own backgrounds, Ryan, we ought to know better. Yes, we were doing radio and yes, we're doing podcasting, but we're doing business, okay? The CFL is a business and TSN is a business. And TSN's business model requires CFL contests because CFL contests get great ratings. I don't yet know what the ratings were last night, but I'm positive they were fantastic. They had to be fantastic because sometimes the ratings die in the fourth quarter when it's too obvious to too many people, regardless of how inebriated they are, that there's no real contest here. And the announcers are just trying to, keep people jacked up about a contest that isn't on the field. But the contest was on the field literally in the last 10 seconds is when you had the winning touchdown by the Montreal Alouettes. So I'm positive they got great ratings last night. And the bottom line is, as long as the CFL is a giant coast-to-coast TV show, which is what it is, and as long as it's a successful TV show, the CFL ain't dying. And I guess it was Mark Twain years ago, and Ryan, you're always better on the details than I am. You're my winger on details, but this expression was something like, reports of my demise are exaggerated. I think is that
reports
right?
Reports of my death are greatly exaggerated.
Thank you. Reports of my death are greatly exaggerated, said Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain. And I think we can honestly say that based on it being a great TV show with great ratings, and yes, advertisers spending a lot of money, I think that it's fair to say that reports of the CFL's death are greatly exaggerated.
I'm reading here, and I shouldn't be doing this because we're doing this live on the fly. But apparently, I'm citing mentalfloss.ca, this website, which I'm not super familiar with. But they say that Mark Twain is actually typically quoted inaccurately on that quote. So I don't know, but hey, we always want to fact check on the show, right? So here we are,
man. Not only do I count on you for the details, I count on you to second guess.
No, I don't. This is just interesting. Hey, we're all gonna learn something together here. So per mental floss, and who knows? I mean, who even knows if they're right? But in 1897, in 1897, an English journalist from the New York Journal contacted Mark Twain to inquire whether the rumors that he was gravely ill or already dead were indeed true, and he wrote a response which made it into the article that ran in the New York Journal on June 2nd of 1897. Here it is. Quote, Mark Twain was undecided whether to be more amused or annoyed when a journal representative informed him today of the report in New York that he was dying in poverty in London. The great humorist, while not perhaps very robust, is in the best of health. He said, I can understand perfectly how the report of my illness got about. I have even heard on good authority that I was dead. James Ross Clemens, a cousin of mine, was seriously ill 2 or 3 weeks ago in London, but is well now. The report of my illness grew out of his illness. The report of my death was an exaggeration. So there you go. That's the official quote.
That's pretty close to the.
It's pretty good.
The quote that we all quote.
Pretty good. Hey, Chuck, is it inappropriate for we've been talking to Ariella, Kimmel, Kristin Raworth, the two of them co-authoring this piece in The Line, and we've got talking about union leaders. Leaders of sexual assault centers, pride centers, what have you, signing on to open letters that are taking strong positions, not calling for a ceasefire, not calling for peace, but calling into doubt the validity of reports of things like sexual assault. In your mind, when does union leadership cross a line signing something like this?
Well, Brian, when have you ever heard me? I mean, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, as I think everyone who watches and listens to this podcast knows. So when is the last time that you heard me compare anything to Holocaust denial?
Right.
Okay, so here I am doing that. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't think sexual assault was serious. Now, both of us have spent some time in our youth in courts. And when you're doing court coverage, crime coverage, you get to see photos that you don't allow your viewers to see because they are massively uncomfortable. So I don't know how much you've done in your career, but I had the displeasure of seeing crime photos that were sexual assault crimes. I have never seen sexual assault crime photos that compare to what Hamas, this is not Israel, this is not a Jewish media person, this is not an activist saying this. I have never seen sexual assault photos with my own eyes that compare to what Hamas claims they did to women. I'm not just talking about rape. Rape is bad enough. I'm talking about, I'm going to be very graphic here, so for those people who don't want to handle that kind of content, just turn it down. Whatever you're listening to, turn it down for a few seconds. Hamas has claimed that some of their people, and I'm using that word with a very, very liberal definition, some of their people were not just raping women, but they were inserting knives and guns. So for anyone in Alberta, University of Alberta, sexual assault center professor, I don't care who you are, for anyone to get into rape denial, that is the denial of rape if it's a Jewish woman or someone connected to a Jewish woman making the charge, this is as low as it gets, in my opinion. I don't think you and I have ever discussed anything on this show that is as reprehensible as this. And I don't care whether you're a union leader, a union supporter, an academic. I don't care. You want to sign off on rape denial? You're on your own, Jack.
Yeah, I agree. Let's turn the page here. I know that you are intrigued by recent polling. Tristan Hopper has written about it. His headline grabbed my attention. Canadians appeared to have stopped caring about climate change. I don't think that's true. But the headline worked. It got me to click and read. It's his first reading. It's a weekly thing that he does in the National Post. And he cites polling done by Angus Reid, where Canadians were asked which political party they would prefer to manage the country's climate change file. And the winner in the poll, if you want to call it that, was the Conservative Party of Canada under Pierre Poilievre. Almost 1 in 3 people, 28%, say they want the Tories managing Canada's climate change file. 14% want the Liberals, the status quo, you might call it. So half. Now, the Conservative plan on climate change, we don't really know what it is. It has yet to be announced.
They want Maxime Bernier's people. They want Danielle Smith's people. I'm talking about the base, okay?
Yeah.
They want all these bases, okay? They want the people right at the bottom, the people I think of as the catfish, okay? The bottom feeders. So if you're in politics and you're looking for the bottom of every single base that you're targeting, you're not trying to submit a climate change plan. You're trying to come as close to denying climate change as possible, because people at the bottom of that base don't believe in climate change. Now, I don't believe in Tristan Hopper's headline, and I'm not going to say that Tristan Hopper created the headline. There's a very good chance someone else at the National Post did.
Yep.
But we can get into this issue. But can you explain to me, Ryan, just as a fellow professional, what is the point of saying when you've got the Angus Reid poll in your hands, what is the point of saying that Canadians no longer care about climate change? That isn't even close to what the poll says.
Well, if 28%, if double the amount of people say they want the Conservatives managing the climate change file,
right.
Let me go to Tristan's writing. He says,
Sure.
what's more, respondents were endorsing a version of the Conservative Party that has very explicitly not prioritized climate change.
Right.
Under Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, the Conservatives were very careful about stressing to the electorate that they cared about rising emissions and had a viable plan to bring them down. But under Poilievre, there are no emissions targets, and he hasn't even released a climate change strategy. The party's chief issue is abolishing the carbon tax, and whenever somebody asks what policy will replace it, the Tory answer is technology. I think Tristan's reporting fairly on this. I guess probably
Tristan's reporting is fair. The headline is torqued. The headline is not fair. If I tell you that 15% of Canadians believe that Elvis is alive, and the headline is Canadians believe Elvis is alive, I'm torquing the headline. And even torquing the headline is a euphemism.
Hey, but hang on a second. If twice as many Canadians believe that Elvis is alive as Canadians that believe he's dead, then the way that we operate as storytellers is majority of Canadians believe Elvis is alive. And do I wish he was, but you know how it works.
I'm sorry. I'm very traditional. I'm very conservative. A majority means 50% plus one. That's a majority. Not 14%, 17%, 28%, 18% compared to 9%. Even for people who want to vote for Poilievre, people who want to vote Conservative, I'm never going to say that the majority of them don't believe in climate change. I think what's true is, and if this were the headline would be one that I wouldn't quarrel with. Climate change is a lower priority at the ballot box than it's ever been. I think that's true. Would you agree that that's really the nub of the Angus Reid story, that climate change, because of affordability, because of the price of housing, price of food, because some people in Canada, too many are one paycheck away from poverty. Climate change, they may believe that there's climate change happening, but they don't want to spend the kind of money that the government wants them to spend money on. I mean, is it fair to say that politically it's not as much of a priority as it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically asking, like, if we were going to go to the polls right now, what would the ballot box question be, right? I mean, so we actually, our Friday roundtable, our Real Talk roundtable, it's a Friday tradition. Sure. Like just this past Friday, like 3 days ago, people can check it out. We talked to 3 of the new panel members. The IRPP has a new Affordability Action Council, and we talked to the 3 of them about that, and they argued that Canadians have the capacity, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, politically, and otherwise, to care concurrently about the climate crisis and the affordability crisis. But I think when it comes to brass tacks, when it comes to the pencil in your hand, when you're casting your vote for who you want to represent you, right now, if we were to vote 100%, the ballot box question would be about affordability, not about climate change.
Yeah. No, even among, and this is, I'm glad that Tristan put this into his story, the National Post, even among 18 to 34, which we sometimes simply call youth, even among the youth vote, climate change is number 5. It's not anywhere close to number 1, number 2, or number 3, and it's well out of the top 5 as far as the average voter is concerned. But once again, I don't want to, be Mr. Politically correct on climate change, except I just don't want people to have the takeaway that suddenly we become a climate denial country. People do believe that there is climate change, and people do believe in so-called man-made climate. What's the political correct term? You can't say man-made anymore.
I don't know. Human caused, probably.
Yeah, whatever. Industrialized climate change, emissions induced climate change, and all that. Emissions that are being emitted because we want to do something radical like heat our homes.
How about stuff that's happening now that wouldn't be happening if humans weren't here?
Exactly. All right, fine.
It's got a real nice ring to it. It really flows.
I just recall the word. We don't even have to go Google for this. I just did the search engine in just under my Real Talk ball cap. Okay.
Attaboy.
And the search engine underneath my Real Talk ball cap says anthropogenic. Is that right?
Yeah,
right
I think so.
Okay, anthropogenic. So the majority of Canadians believe in anthropogenic climate change, but the majority of Canadians don't want to vote on it. And it has to be said here, and I realize this is utterly politically incorrect, but it has to be said here that most Canadians don't believe that there's anything they can do in terms of carbon taxes, whether they pay carbon tax, whether the carbon tax gets doubled, tripled, quadrupled, whether it makes the salary at the superstore even more expensive. They don't honestly believe that it'll be more than a drop in the ocean in the climate change problem, because Canadians do understand that there are far more people in China and India than there are in Canada, and there's far more stuff going into those skies than there is in Canada. Many Canadians are of Chinese and South Asian origin, and many of them do go back from time to time to visit the homeland, and you can hardly see the sun on most days, and that's because of, yes, human-made, human-triggered emissions. And they are the ones who are most responsible for climate change. And if people want to say, well, that's a horribly ethnocentric thing to say or a racist thing to say, fine. Go sign a petition. The truth is there are far more people living in India and China and far more emitting going on in those countries than are here. And yes, there's also far more going on in the United States and some other countries. But as far as the top 2 emitters in the world, it's India and China, and Canada is nowhere close to even the top 30.
I want to get to Sharon's comment before I put something else in front of you. Sharon says you have to make it more relational when it comes to climate change and how people feel about it. Ask folks who are living in it. Ask the northern folks. Ask the ones who were evacuated 3 times last year. They are most definitely concerned. I guarantee Canadians are still concerned about climate change.
Absolutely.
But the way that we're wired as humans, man, is like, especially if you have people under your care, especially if you're a parent, though not exclusively, if you're a grandparent, whatever the case may be, like, what do you care more about? You care more about the more pressing matter. Like, I care more about, and this is not a choice that I think people should have to make, let me be clear, but I care more if I can't afford housing for my family after next month, or if I don't know how we're going to buy groceries next week, I care about that more than I care about what planet Earth might look like 50 years from now, that doesn't mean I don't care about what planet Earth might look like 50 years from now. Like that's just a regular human reaction, right? That's probably comes down to us as animals. What do animals care more about? The threat staring them in the face, or the threat that will probably but might not materialize in 100 years? They care about the one right now. The gazelle cares about the leopard chasing it more than when it's going to get its next meal, right?
Yeah, that's how we gazelles think. Absolutely.
Do leopards hunt gazelles? I think so.
Right, but it's not that I want to do work for David Parker, Pierre Poilievre, or Danielle Smith or anything, but I have to be just honest about this because that's kind of what I do. Okay, so it's not a left-right thing; it's just an honest thing. And honest to God, most Canadians are intelligent enough to know that regardless of how effective the carbon tax might be, on the margins, reducing emissions, even if we reduced our emissions to nothing, even if Canada ceased to exist, climate change would continue because Canada has 40 million people in a world, and you can look this up on Google, in a world with billions and billions of people. We are a small percentage of the planet. We are the greatest country on earth in my subjective opinion. Okay, Canada is my promised land, and all of that. But that doesn't overwhelm the math. The math is the math, and the math says that we are a tiny, tiny percentage, as I said earlier, a drop in the ocean of what's causing climate change.
True, but that can't drive our resolve, right? Like, it's something that Canada still has to take seriously. There's nothing more high profile when it comes to emissions in North America than Alberta's oil sands. Would you agree?
Well, obviously, and I've said a million times that the term ethical oil is a total oxymoron. And I understand, our oil is more ethical because the countries that compete with us in the oil market, the Saudi Arabias and whatever, their politics is less ethical than our politics, and certainly less democratic, and human rights goes by the boards. I understand all that. That stuff is just drop dead simple. But the point remains, okay, that while our resolve may be there, the idea that we actually believe that the policy of carbon taxes and higher carbon taxes are going to significantly reduce emissions in worldwide climate change, most of us don't believe that. Now, we do believe in being good world citizens and being role models and all the rest of that stuff. But none of that drives politics at the ballot box in 2023, 2024, and 2025. And I can just tell you this is just political science 101. When you're explaining, you're losing. And when you're explaining the same thing over and over again after a period of 7 or 8 or 9 years, you lose a lot of political impact. And right now, the Liberals are getting no bang at all for climate change.
Bunny Slippers is 100% correct in the live chat. Sorry guys, but droughts are happening right now, not in 50 years. Temperature changes are happening right now. Bunny Slipper says, ask a farmer if droughts are happening now. We hear from them all the time, and we know it to be true. And maybe I'm being a little bit lazy in my language, saying, what might happen in 50 years. I guess all I'm saying is that while we do certainly see it happening now, I mean, I'm the one that, I'm the guy that watches the video of the polar bear that doesn't have enough ice anymore and worries about the polar bear. And then I see the polar bear, thank God it gets a meal and it gets the seal. And then I feel bad for the seal. And then Johnny gets in my ear about moving to a plant-based diet, right? Johnny, I know that I need to do that as well. I know. See, I'm just a big bleeding heart, Chuck. And by the way, another fact check on the fly. While leopards do eat over 90 different species, their preferred food sources are indeed antelope, gazelles, and impalas, the ungulates. Right. So there you go. That per
by the way,
PBS.
can I give Johnny a little hell here?
No. Oh, you up for it, pal?
Okay, because Johnny.
Come on, Adler. It's Monday. Let's go easy.
Johnny. I respect you and your wife for being vegans, and for to every now and then giving vegans a plug. Some members of my family who I love dearly are also vegans. Okay.
Okay.
But what have you done lately? What have you done lately? What have what has Johnny Infamous done lately to convince a leopard to go vegan? How many leopards have you converted, Johnny?
I have a really good story, Adler, about how I tried to convince a bison, actually.
He did.
Go vegan.
Actually, I believe bisons do live on a vegan diet.
It was nearly the end of me. It was this close to being Johnny No More. So yeah,
you got a little closer than recommended.
Yeah, I was like, you can tell I'm a lover of animals, right? But they tell you right when you're at Elk Island, like, do not go anywhere near the fucking bisons.
Near them. Don't go near them.
Do not go near them. And I, of course, everyone pulls over at the side of the road. They take the cameras out and they go roll down the windows and they shoot from far away. And I just had to get out. And Jason's like, you freaking idiot.
Don't do
back
this.
in the car. And
It's
I'm
not
like,
worth it.
I just want to get a little closer so it doesn't look like I'm in the car. And immediately it started rolling at me, Ryan.
Yeah, and they move faster than you think.
Oh, really fast.
Yeah,
They look big and bulky and chunky. No, they're super quick.
Yeah, unbelievable.
But you know what drives me crazy? Vegans are always being told, and vegetarians as well, you're not getting enough protein. You have to have steak.
Yeah,
right? You have to have turkey, you have to have chicken, you have to have pork, or else you're not getting protein. So how many turkeys and chickens and pigs are moose killing? Because moose look pretty strong to me.
Yeah.
Moose do not have a protein deficit.
Well,
how are the moose getting their protein?
Yeah. Look at gorillas, man. Gorillas don't eat a lick of meat. They eat all plants.
Arguably,
and they are the strongest. One of the strongest animals on the earth. But I say this all the time. Every time someone orders a salad, some bro somewhere screams into the abyss, all elk meat diet is better.
Yeah, gorillas.
By the way, Arnold
Schwarzenegger
is also a vegan, and I have a feeling that Arnold understands protein and understands what the risks would be. What I'm simply saying is that there's a big urban myth out there that unless you're a carnivore, you're not getting protein. Not true.
No, that's
well,
true.
Look, eat what you want. I'm not. Me and my partner, we're not one to run into McDonald's and slap cheeseburgers out of people's
You're
hands.
the furthest thing from that.
For us, it works. And for me, the one thing is the energy. Just a lot more energy than before. But I will say that before, when I ate meat, it wasn't like, I wasn't eating like lean turkey breast every day. I was eating, pizza and
pot
burgers.
roast, pal.
Yeah,
all the good stuff. I want to. At risk of offending all three of us at once, I'm going to refocus the conversation. If that's
only
okay.
you can do that, Ryan.
If that's all right.
Only you have that skill.
Those nettlesome hosts.
But
they're always focusing.
They're always returning the what the hell's with this? But this is how people talk. We always say, like, if you want to listen to real talk, it's like, either participating in or eavesdropping in on a conversation at a coffee shop. And that's the whole point. And so here's the thing. On climate action. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to a new handle that I'm just seeing for the first time in our live chat, Reheated Lasagna. What a great handle.
Lasagna is one of my favorite foods.
But it's tough to reheat. It is an art if you can properly reheat lasagna.
It's messy. It can be messy.
Well, and then it's like super hot on the top and cool in the middle, and it's a nightmare. But Reheated Lasagna says, these types of conversations fill me with existential dread. We are so not prepared to deal with this issue, climate change, on the scale that it needs to be dealt with. And to a certain degree, my perspective aligns there. And Chuck, there have been two recent decisions by Canada's top court, the Supreme Court of Canada, siding with the provinces. And we talked about this about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago when the ruling came out. Daniel Smith, Scott Moe, other premiers basically counting it as a win for energy expansion, for infrastructure development. The Supreme Court basically saying, and we talked to law professor Martin Olshinsky about this, if people want to search it in our archive, saying that the feds had overstepped on regulatory and matters, and that the provinces basically got the big win there. And then the Supreme Court, was it last week, 2 weeks ago, striking down what they called an unconstitutional plastics ban, saying that the feds, you got a plastic straw in your hand. Did you know we were going to talk about this? You didn't.
I just had a vibe, okay, because there's no way to talk about climate change with Ryan Jesperson, Mr. Dairy Queen, right?
That's right.
There's no way to talk to Mr. Dairy Queen without getting into straws. So I prepared. I did show prep, my friend.
Do you carry a plastic straw around you to restaurants and places? Like,
no.
Some people do.
I don't do that, but I do favor plastic over paper when it comes to straws. And if you want to blame me for Alberta wildfires, fine. Go ahead and blame me. I like plastic straws.
Yeah, well, and I just don't think that that big paper straw. I don't think that the whoever it is that's putting paper straws together. By the way, number one, someone pointed out to me, like, you go to Starbucks and they'll serve your iced latte to you in a plastic cup with a paper straw. Like, what are we even doing right now? But the paper straws, I saw somebody else say that I know for a fact that paper straws are biodegradable because they are biodegrading as we speak in my drink right now. They're just lousy.
They're biodegrading right into my teeth.
But in all seriousness, you look at, and so people will say, good on the Supreme Court for protecting the rights of industry and the provinces and the autonomy and the way it's supposed to go. But also, those are two back-to-back punches in the gut for the environmental lobby in Canada. And I'm being deadly serious about that.
I do it. I understand that you're being deadly serious, and I don't want to come across today as a Neanderthal. I just have this obligation to be a realist. And so when I read the Angus Reid survey, I thought to myself, this is an important survey because it gives people, especially those people who are involved in media and politics, a reality check that Canadians can chew gum and walk straight. They can believe that climate change is a serious issue, but they might not believe that the carbon tax is to use an Albertaism, is getting her done. I realize it's not just an Albertaism. Alberta just likes to use that expression, which comes from somewhere in the States. But if everyone really believed that the carbon tax was getting it done, I think that the carbon tax and those people promoting it, like the Liberal Party of Canada, would have more support.
I don't even know if the Liberals are promoting the carbon tax anymore. I don't think the Liberals even know if they're promoting the carbon tax anymore. It's been so mismanaged over the past couple of months. I think that nobody is more lucky that the next federal election is 2 years away than the Liberals.
Of course.
Right?
But I mean, once the Liberals decided that Atlantic Canada was gone, unless they took the carbon tax off the heating oil, they should have done it right across the country.
100%.
That is to be nice about it, to use a nice euphemism, tone deaf. It is totally tone deaf if you're a national government and you're giving one part of the country a break and giving the rest of the country the finger. Sorry. Either everyone gets the break or everyone gets the finger.
We love you, Chuck. We look forward to this chat every week. We'll do it again in 7 days.
Yeah. By the way, Mark Twain didn't say that. I said that. You either give everyone the break or everyone the finger.
My favorite thing that you said today, I don't want to come across as a Neanderthal, but talk to you again soon, pal.
All right. See you later.
You bet. You can subscribe if you want more Chuck to the Charles Adler Show. That's his daily podcast. And, of course, follow him on Twitter.
More Chuck for your buck.
More Chuck for your buck. That'll be a good T-shirt. I like this. This is a great comment from Kimberly, who just says, and she hits the nail on the head, why do people feel the need to provide input into other people's personal decisions? She says it happens more with vegans and sober people than anybody else. Like, mind your own business and live your best life. She's bang on. I was talking to a friend of mine who's been sober now for a year and about 4 days. So proud of him. Had his last drink just over a year ago, and for personal reasons, which he's not obligated to explain. I'm just so proud of him that he's sworn off beer, most especially because he owns a brewery.
Oh,
so it's amazing.
Good for him.
It's
then.
amazing.
That's amazing.
But we were talking about this and just the realization that he's come to is that you almost feel, and let me be clear, you are not obligated to do this, but he said it's strange. He feels like he almost has to say to people, oh, no, thanks, I'm not drinking, and then provide a reason why. But you don't have to.
No, it's like the 90s when the kids who went to the clubs, straight edge, they had to put the black X on their hand.
Like Biff Naked.
Just so people wouldn't offer them a drink. And I don't want to bring this up because then people are going to be like, oh, she's vegan but my wife doesn't drink. So we went out, we went out on a date a couple weeks ago and we went to a bunch of watering holes and, it's just not her thing. She orders, alcohol-free cocktails. And a lot of places are offering mocktails now, which is great. But when somebody, even a server, tries to get you into, oh, what can we start you with? And you're like, no, mocktail. Are you sure? Like it's like you've got a scarlet letter on you or something. Because, and I get it, drinking is such a social thing, right? But more power to everyone these days who are trying to be healthier, and not everybody has to do it. I mean, she's not sober. She still partakes in, the other thing. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking. You're
talking
about how your life partner is plant-based in several different ways, and I fully support that.
I'll also say plastic cups better than plastic straws because you can recycle them easier.
Okay.
So the plastic straw problem is they degrade and get in. the seawater, right? And they a million pieces so fast. And
we have a
all
huge
that stuff,
problem.
right?
We have a huge plastic is a huge problem. Like Sylvia says, and hang on, guys. Sylvia says the plastics ban just wasn't worded to conform to constitutionality. It will be changed, I'm sure. I just feel like, to me, these are two high-profile stories. And again, the majority of people get their news from a platform like Real Talk. We sure appreciate that. Or read the headlines, or you see a quick tweet, and you don't get in and get into the minutia and the details. But just two high-profile decisions by the courts that would lead you to believe that, quite frankly, environmental action in Canada has been set back 20 years. And I don't 100% mean those words, but they're two high-profile decisions out of the Supreme Court that are not maybe going in the direction that a lot of people would prefer.
Yeah, and Alberta girl here, who I often don't agree with, but I'm going to give her big ups. She says plant-based plastics are biodegradable and should be the norm. And that's another thing where, a lot of plastic is made from, oil products, right? And that's another big moneymaker.
I love this. People are talking about booze and kind of their lives. Sharon says, I don't drink either. That's why I made the coffee comment last week. I read that comment. Sharon, we appreciated that. We were joking about having Caesars at 10 in the morning. Others are saying, like Jason says, he stopped drinking 5 years ago. He says, it's almost like I need to wear a shirt.
Totally.
That every relationship in my life is better when I don't drink. Jason, congratulations on getting to that point. I mean, that's amazing. A lot of people either never get there or they get there when it's too late. Others are saying, like CS is bang on, says the societal push on alcohol is intense. Congratulations to those that don't need the stuff.
Super intense. Like anytime you're celebrating, it's like, let's have a drink.
Yeah.
It's like immediately, if you're celebrating, alcohol is involved. And it's a strange thing. Well, it's not strange. It's
even the language you use, right? Like celebration, I think popping bottles.
Exactly.
Like you
champagne.
Just, right?
Yeah.
You
immediately.
You just think about it. We talked about, the affordability crisis, and if you didn't catch our roundtable just this past Friday, just a few days ago, I encourage you to look at that. It was a really, really interesting conversation, a neat conversation about what needs to be done across the country, policy-wise and otherwise. And you're going to go, Ryan, really? Like, I've got 1 hour of free time today, and you want me to listen to people talking about policy? But they take it and policy into practice. Like, whose job is it? Is it City Hall's job? Is it the legislature's job? Is it the House of Commons? Whose job is it to make life more affordable? And how do we dangle carrots in front of landlords to be more energy efficient and to invest that? But then also, how do we protect renters, right? Nobody really talks about renters. Very few people do. And housing stock in Canada. How realistic is it to get 1 million houses built in the next few years, like all the experts say we need to do? And if that is going to happen, then how do the governments make it attractive for developers? Yeah, that's right. Big, bad developers. If you listen to some people, developers are the bad guy. You listen to other people, like Jennifer Keesmaat on this show a couple of months ago. If not developers, then who? You really want cities that can't get public transit built even 3 years late? Quarterbacking brand new neighborhoods?
No.
Not a chance. It's a terrible idea. So I recommend that roundtable. We heard from Stacey just over the weekend. I love this. Got this Saturday at 5 in the morning, although she was writing from New Brunswick. So I think it was more like almost 8 o'clock there. She's getting into her first coffee and a real talker from New Brunswick. The subject line, broke in New Brunswick. That's coming up in just a quick second. But we want to remind you that these conversations, this show doesn't happen without the support of partners of ours like our friends at Friesen Brothers. They've got their new minced meat pie ready for you as they're getting set to celebrate the season. We get the holiday lights going up on a bunch of the houses, Johnny, in our neighborhood. Pretty exciting stuff. People are turning the corner. Friesen Brothers, for a limited time only, offering their minced meat pie. Plus, they've got Granny Loveson's fruitcake. You're not going to want to miss that. All kinds of ways for you to get into the spirit of the season at the 16 and soon to be 17 Friesen Brothers across Alberta. That company, still family owned, coming up on 70 years, Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And our friends at Eden Landscaping want to remind you as well that, it's the time of year that they're not going to pretend like they're getting out there breaking ground on new landscaping projects right now. They're busting out their pencils. They're busting out their drafting equipment. They're getting the plans drawn up so they can make sure that when spring arrives and that ground thaws, they're ready to go on your brand new project, bringing your outdoor space to life. one of the reasons why you're going to want to get in touch with them today at landscapeedmonton.ca. If you have special plans, you want something unique that sets your yard apart, a lot of times with supply chain issues, they've got to get these materials ordered months in advance if you want them to arrive on time. So you got your 50th birthday or your 50th wedding anniversary. Maybe it's a retirement party. Hey, maybe it's an engagement announcement that you're going to be hosting in your backyard next summer. Start the conversation with Eden Landscaping today at landscapeedmonton.ca. We hear from Stacey on Saturday to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Broke in New Brunswick, says her subject line. She says, I love your show. I'm a real talker as well. We love hearing from people across the country. Says, I'm a lifelong resident of New Brunswick. I've had a job since I was 15. I'm now 53. My house is about 70 years old. There's mold in the ceilings, the walls, the bathrooms. Half the electrical outlets and light fixtures don't work because of broken circuit breakers. There's rotten boards on our deck. And the list goes on. And I can't afford to get any of it fixed. I can't sell it to somebody who could fix it because I can't afford rent anywhere. Even a studio or one-bedroom apartment is minimum $1,500 a month. And that's in a part of the city where your landlord tells you that if you do decide to rent there, you better call your insurance company because you can expect your car to be broken into. And by the way, good luck even finding an affordable apartment in a bad location. I have one son who recently graduated from college living at home because he surely can't afford rent anywhere either. My oldest son living outside the home renting with 3 friends because it's the only way any of them can even barely afford to live on their own. They all went to university. They're all carrying student loans. They have car payments, and they all have what I would consider to be good jobs here in New Brunswick because of their expensive educations, but it's still not enough for any of them to be able to afford rent in their own place, let alone buy a house. Stacey says, I drive an 11-year-old car that is on the precipice of requiring expensive repairs, and I'm sharing this car with my son who's still at home because his 15-year-old car is not safe to drive. I mean, it deserves to be junked. He can't afford even the most basic transportation, leasing or renting, and that includes old used cars. And good luck even finding an affordable, basic, cheap car, new or used, says Stacey. The other day, my 21-year-old son told me that he and his friends talk about how they'll probably never be able to buy a house. These are hardworking, motivated, well-educated young people. At 21, worrying about such huge things. At their age, all I worried about was where the party was going to be that weekend. As a parent, it's heartbreaking. I've been a single mom of 2 kids for almost 20 years, so I've always lived paycheck to paycheck. My house is heavily mortgaged. I have lines of credit and credit card debt. I live a life of robbing Peter to pay Paul every month. Which bill can wait another month or 2 without getting my water or electricity shut off? Even with all of the above, I consider myself to be extremely lucky to have these problems. I say all the time, don't judge people experiencing homelessness because most of us are just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in the exact same circumstance. Thanks for your roundtable, and keep on keeping it real. That from Stacey, broke in New Brunswick. How amazing is that? Messages like that mean the world to us. Stacey, we appreciate you sharing your perspective, your experience, and I can guarantee that your words will resonate with hundreds, if not thousands of people experiencing the exact same thing. It reiterates to us the importance of having those conversations, of talking to the experts, but also having everyday folks, the people you meet on the street, the people you meet in the coffee shops, tell us how government policies, how industry developments, how job market implications are impacting them in their everyday real lives. So, Stacey, thank you for having the courage to share your firsthand experience. We're going to wrap up today's show on a real positive, and this one was submitted by Landon, and we love when real talkers let us know what they'd like to see reflected in positive reflections, presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. This is our time to step outside the news cycle and celebrate good stories, and Landon says, I wonder if anybody would recognize the name Ronald McNair. He says, I just learned of this story myself. Ronald McNair, at 9 years of age, back in 1959, went to enter a segregated library. At 9 years of age, he tried to check out books, but they wouldn't let him because Ronald McNair was black. Now, this guy rose through the ranks, excelling in school, excelling in his career, to the point that he was the second African American ever in space on the shuttle Challenger. Now, of course, you know the fate of the shuttle Challenger. In 1986, Ronald McNair was one of those on board when Challenger exploded on liftoff. He was killed at just 35 years of age. A sad and tragic story, but here's the thing. In memoriam, the library where Ronald McNair was turned away at 9 years of age is now named after him. That's right, the Ronald McNair Library, in memory of a great achiever who left us far too soon at 35 years of age. Landon says, I didn't know the background. I didn't know the story. It reminded me of the power we have as humans to right a wrong, but also that some of our wrongs are in our not too distant past. Landon, thank you for sharing that with us. You can pass along your positive reflection to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Proudly presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. You can get a free solar quote today by visiting kubyenergy.ca. Coming up on tomorrow's episode of Real Talk, we're going to check in with Dr. Timothy Caulfield. He's got something cooking. And then the author of a new report out on the Alberta pension plan is going to join us on Wednesday. Is there any way to spin it as a good deal? We'll find out. We'll talk to you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks.